Stories about locals you've come across IRL.
I went to high school with an autistic girl who was very aware of the fact she had autism. Her parents were old school Koreans, so they had too much pride to admit that their kid was a genetic fuck-up. Her primary interests included Soul Calibur and the Zodiac. She was notorious for knowing every single person's birthday in my grade. We later found out she would e-stalk people for social networking and learn everything about people. She had a creepier stare than Chris's. She always looked surprised and happy. Every fucking time you'd see her, she'd be smiling with only her upper set of teeth exposed, like that silly face everyone made when they were a kid. Her eyes were wide open all the time. The girl was under the impression that everyone liked her and she was popular. She would often attempt to eat lunch with the popular kids, show up at parties, etc. At school, all the teachers hated her. On top of being a Sperg, she was dumb and lazy as fuck. She would raise her hand and ask obvious questions. On top of that, since her parents were old school folks living in the suburbs, they were religious. She thought that God hates fakes was a normal Christian mantra and often screamed that.
There's a retard at school who's retired as fake. We used to yell tiff time about this dude. Talk about fun, yeah.
In 9th grade, I took an art class with a friend of mine and some older kids. Among the ones was a sophomore and had some serious issues. I don't necessarily know if he was autistic, but he often fell back on the crutch of post-traumatic stress. There was a Christ fag who carried a Bible everywhere with him, and when he was in a bad mood, he'd whip it out, stick it out on the table, and glare up at people every now and then. Of course he'd have his good days too. Every now and again he'd join us in our joking and being general assholes. However, he'd escalate, start calling us jackasses and getting personal. We'd reciprocate. It was all fun and games. But of course he'd fly up the handle and cry to the teacher for us big meaty heads. He also believed he was a messenger from God and could foresee natural disasters. After I started online high school, my friend would put back to me the crazy shit he did. Once he ratted the hall, screamed out a tornado. He was also given a walkie-talkie by the teachers in case if anyone was
To contribute, there was this one guy I remember back in middle school. He wasn't autistic, but he had a deformity. I can't recall the name of it at the moment, but basically his head was extremely deformed and basically box-shaped and flat. And he had web hands. This was middle school, and this guy was extremely tall, skinny, and lanky, but kind of hunched over. He wore boxy shoes, kind of reminding me of Herman Munster in that respect, with a square head and the boxy platform shoes, but nowhere near as endearing. You know those proof of a loving God pictures with the babies with the bug-out eyes and the squished face and that mouth constantly hanging open? That's what he looked like. Literally, his head looked squished. He was like a bad drawing and making his head stick out more. He grew it out practically into an afro. Horrible teeth as well, of course. Anyway, nobody really talked to him. Not because he was weird looking, but because he was actually something of a bully, constantly smacking anyone shorter than him on the back of the head with his massive left hand and giggling about it. Kids that tried to make friends just got smacked around. He spoke well enough, though his dialogue was mostly limited to English and Spanish insults. Anyway, one day on a bus ride, he kept smacking this one kid who got stuck sitting next to him. It was one of the shorter ones. When the kid got off the bus, he turned back and if he got a finger, he called him an asshole and an ugly freak. The guy defiantly laughed and stuck his arm out the window trying to give the kid the finger back, but there was this unbelievably crushed look on his face when he was reminded, oh yeah, my fingers are stuck together, I can't give the finger. Everybody started laughing at him and he sunk down into his seat. He never picked on anyone again after that. Apparently that was all it took.
Did somebody call him a retard flipper baby at one point?
I went to high school with a Cara, who was a locale back then as well, but surprisingly most of his friends were worse than he was. As is, he's always been an insufferable weirdo nerd nigger, but his friends were straight up autistics.
Districts at the start of high school. Every time we begin to turn around the time that Snowgoin versus Capcom was released in the States, he'd obtain a copy and invite me over several times to play it. So the first time I'm coming to his house, it reeks of marijuana. He lives with his parents, so I guess the first thing I get to know about them is they are 50 doorbell. You can hear scurrying and liberal amounts of Alf being sprayed. Enter our specimen. A stout, stubbly, autistic 21-year-old gentleman who buys collection of video games and Legos. Sitting on a couch with his fucking junk hanging out the hole in his Mario pajama pants. First thing you notice is the smug tone of voice he takes with you. Everything is his inferior. You beat him in a 1-versus-1 match. You're out of his house! It got so bad I got to the habit of pressing the power button on the Wiimote when I wanted to leave early. Killing his saves and my whip. He farted constantly. He would nibble on his toenails while waiting for the game to start. I shit you not, there was a small pile of toenail pieces near the wall to the left of where he sat. You know, you're thinking I should have just left once after an unsatisfying game of TVC, but I was done and learning how and why this guy lived the way he did. So I kept coming back to his house. Thinking of it now, it may have been his mother that really kept him from becoming a fine, mild-mannered, albeit awkward member of society. I don't think I ever saw her in a state where she wasn't absolutely mentally turtled with the amount of alcohol she consumed. And through all that insobriety, she had the ability to literally keep us occupied for half an hour at a time over whether or not I was enjoying the time we were spending at her place. Notice how I'm leaving the father out of the picture? He was surprisingly a really personable guy, having resigned himself years ago. What finally caused me to stop coming to his house? One afternoon, his mom shouted she wanted a filet-o-fish and had him drive to go pick one up. I went along as a passenger to observe his driving and ended up getting into an accident. It was nothing big. He just let somebody back into his car and smashed the entire front of it because he failed to sound the horn in time. I barely had enough time to slink away from the car and his shouts of, "You big stinker!" to the motorist before the police came to file a crash report. Sometimes you really have to appreciate the colorful, frustrating little lives some of these guys